Welcome everyone today to Active Teaching Lab Tuesday for October 13th. So glad you're able to join us on our fine discussion of online assessment. Joining me today is Kathy Pikowski from the College of Letters and Science, as well as Ed Price, a fellow consultant from CETL. Both are available to talk with you if you have any questions either during the session today or a little bit afterwards as well. Today's discussion of online assessment is reinforced or really kind of developed a little bit further as well in a slightly different format from the online and blended teaching program. So just to give a little shout out for that, it's one of CETL's programs that we are doing right now to help instructors and help you in online instruction. So they have a session dedicated entirely to online assessment. So assessment in online courses, creating an assessment plan, managing your workload, even thinking about questions of academic integrity as well. And you can find out more information at uwm.edu/CETL. And so there's more information about the online and blended teaching program there, as well as some information on how to do this with a cohort of instructors, or just do it on your own. All of that's available at uwm.edu/CETL. So in the collaborative document today, I wanted us to take a moment to talk about the questions that you had today. What is the one big thing that you wanted to learn today about online assessment? One big problem regarding online assessment you brought with you today, and maybe write out an idea, tip, trick that you found, either in response to someone else's quandary on the left-hand side of the columns, or an idea you think is particularly useful. And I just kind of wanted to talk, just as you're thinking about that, or even as our anonymous coyote is writing right now. And if Maria, could you put that in the Google Doc as well in the chat, this Google Doc, so we can maybe discuss a little bit further and people can respond to it besides just Ed, Kathy, and I. But just to kind of think about why we're doing this, because I've been kind of thinking about this as well lately. Because we've all had to change up our format. Active Teaching Lab is significantly different than when we were doing it the last few semesters when it was face-to-face. We're doing this online, and I was thinking, well, what are we coming together for online? It's not just to hear me do a presentation, or to Ed do a presentation, or Kathy do a presentation, because we could all just record that really easily and then just email that all to you. But really, it's about kind of having a synchronous session is really about building a community and learning together. And I think having some times for collaborative document discussions, and I'm still wearing a vest, Bill, but having this interaction together, I think is really kind of why you do a synchronous session. That's why you have a synchronous session in your classroom. You want to have some interaction with your students. You want to have a chance for question and answer, for discussion. And I think also it's important to do these synchronous sessions because it allows us to do this community, kind of build this community of practice around teaching, and even talking or even kind of joking around clothing. It's just kind of fun to do that when we're all isolated, not on campus together, and are just sitting alone otherwise in our basement, staring at the four concrete walls. And so just to kind of be thinking about, some of the things that you can contribute then, and what we can all learn from each other. And I think that's kind of fun, because I always learn something reading the questions and looking at the answers, or looking at the slides that we do in terms of the discussion. It's really fun. So please take a moment now that I'll stop talking. I'll let everyone just kind of type, ask some questions. What are some big issues you have with online assessment? What are some questions you had? What is something you wanted to take away from today's presentation or today's session? And then if you have ideas or tips and tricks, write those down as well, and kind of contribute and build out that document. All right, so I'll shut up now for 3 minutes. All right, I'm just gonna start going through some of these questions because they're really good, and I really appreciate all the work that you've already put into this, for sharing some really great ideas. So looking at the top question, just because that was the first one in, do you have any great ideas for anonymous midterm feedback? No, I'm not going to talk about feedback today because we're going to talk about it next week. So I'm sorry, there's a limit to how much I'm going to go with this, but yeah, We're going to talk about that next week. So please come back, and then we'll talk about it a lot. Also, though, other questions we should be asking students about experiences outside of contact, like how to handle multiple online classes and how we can make learning easier and more effective. That is also a great question. Does anyone have anything they'd like to share as regards to that?
So, hey, Lane, just
Yeah.
to hop in, and I know we don't want to talk a lot about feedback this week, but I think some people are kind of folding these things into either exams or exam questions. And I think, and I'm not sure who put these up in the feedback on the doc, but there's some really good questions, I think, that could elicit student responses. So I know we're talking about assessment. I think some people are rolling these things into assessment. So
yeah,
and I'm not sure who put those up, like who do you contact for help? How do you feel? How do you take part in the class? Those are also probably nice things to add on to your exams as well. So
thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ed. That's me. That's something I do the first couple weeks, which has really helped me to adjust the class, make quick adjustments before it's too late.
Oh, so just kind of like adding some evaluative questions maybe in an exam or as its own standalone thing to really get some students' feedback on how the course is going, maybe really important because it's such a big difference, right?
Right. This has actually helped me a lot over the years, make my courses much better. Because if people think it's an anonymous survey, and just at the end, and then I'll leave this subject, but these are typically the questions I ask, aside from content. So there are a couple content questions I asked, but the question was aside from content. I always let people know what I do in response. So if I have a number of people saying this is a problem, then in an announcement, I'm going to say, thank you for your survey responses. A number of you suggested doing this. It really helps students feel heard. So I follow up every few weeks because I had one class where I did have some people say they didn't feel like they were part of the class. And I realized it was because I had a number of friends in the class and I was able to adjust. Otherwise, they'd have half of a semester bad experience. So that's my 2 cents on that.
I think it's worth more than 2 cents, Kathy.
I was going to say that's a nickel at least.
Checks in the mail.
And that's really, I think, really helpful for students just to see that, hey, they can have an impact on that class, right? That it's not just something that they have no control over. They're just along for the ride. They're going down the river and they have no ability to change the course of that river. It's something that they can have an influence on and make this something of their own. And adding any level of control, even in a non-COVID year, but I think especially a COVID year where we are feeling out of control, I think that can be really helpful. That's really smart. Thank you, Kathy. I saw that Sarah put this up in the chat, and so I threw it up on the Google Doc. Could we talk today about how people are experiencing student moods? I know that this isn't not assessment, but it seems like students have pretty high anxiety now, and I wondered how people are addressing that. And I imagine that Kathy's answer would maybe help out with that a lot, and really asking students, how are they feeling about the class? How are they feeling like they have enough contact with you? I'm just trying to find ways to help students manage what it is that's going on. I think Kathy's idea would really be helpful for that. But does anyone else have something they'd like to add?
I'll see if I can find a whole list, by the way.
Cool. Thank you, Kathy. Maybe an anonymous iguana has some ideas. Sarah, yes, please.
So I was just thinking about it even in terms of assessments. Students are anxious about how they're doing generally, and then they go into a test and they can't do their best work. So I just was wondering what strategies people were using. I know doing low stakes assignments throughout the semester and having lots of quizzes and all of that is potentially helpful. It also is potentially overwhelming when students are taking 4 or 5 classes. But as we enter like midterms, how are people working through the anxiety their students are having or helping their students deal with that in ways that have been effective?
So I've done a couple things, and I openly acknowledge that I'm teaching this method on. We have some math folks. It's their distribution requirement. They can't graduate without a course like this. So I just acknowledge that your math folks and very openly say, this is the first time I'm teaching this online. So let's work together. And I've been asking for feedback throughout. I'm like, what's working, what's not. I had been doing a homework review session to go over the answers. I moved that to, I'm going to do a Q&A about the homework before you work on it so you can get my insights about what it is. And I usually find a couple of really bad questions. Yeah, that's a sucky question, isn't it? And I'm very open. Yeah, that was a mistake. Oops, and we try to fix the mistakes the best we can. And I think that that's helped. The students have done, and actually have also made, it's really hard to a quantitative course, especially online, because you have to do so much up front, because you have to have a problem that people can solve and it actually has an answer, which is very different from teaching a writing and discussion course where you throw a question out and people elaborate. Totally different game. And so I've been actually having to structure assignments much more information embedded in the assignment rather than, go make a table and do this, because we would do that in class and we would address all the questions. That's my long-winded response.
So in one of my classes, I'm calling them progressive quizzes. So they're every other week, and the points and the number of questions build as we go. And so I'm giving them a lot of a lot of announcements that preview what's coming up. So like, hey, I know we just had one of these quizzes, but there's another one next week. Here's the learning objectives. Here's what students who are succeeding are doing. Here's what their week looks like. And so just being very transparent about like, hey, it's this much of your grade. This is the content. Here's how many questions. Here's when you can do it. So just a lot of communication and a lot of transparency about why they're formatted the way they are and when they're coming and when they're due and things like that.
Thank you, Anne. I kind of feel like anything I would offer is kind of pales in comparison. The one thing that I would add on as well is just, and this is kind of something I'll be talking about a little bit later, but just finding ways to kind of maybe let go of some of the ways that we've taught or done quizzes in the past. Maybe opening up the time frame so it's not such a condensed time frame, but opening up the time block so students have more time to complete it. And I'll talk a lot more about some of these ideas a little bit later on, and then also in the handout that I'll send out tomorrow, I'll have some stuff that actually addresses this question head on, Sarah. But really, Bill and Anne had some really good comments on that already. So I feel like even if we just stopped at that, that would be really helpful. Bill, yeah, go for it.
I just want to add a perspective that my 24-year-old daughter was shipped home from Peace Corps in Namibia and is here and started a master's degree program this fall. And it's been really fun to talk to her about her experience, because she's got one class where the professor from 2 to 6 on Friday afternoon has a synchronous session. Ouch. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. 4 hours Zoom call learning, or we're paying for it. And so I'm learning from her experiences of like, I listen to her complain, I totally get that. And a lot of my students are her age, because a lot of my students just happen to be like, oh, I'm going to graduate school because I don't have a job. And so that's been very helpful for me to be like, okay, I get it. I'm living the dream.
Thank you, Bill. Yeah, a 4-hour Zoom call does seem rather excessive. Moving on down the question list, how do we make exam integrity? And some people already had some really good answers as well in there already. So having open-ended questions, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talk about this all the time. You can find pretty much anything, everything about your particular course online. Having open-ended questions can be a really good way of having students having to reflect and not just copy and paste whatever they find off Wikipedia. Project papers and exams, there's really good content already up there. Is anyone want to discuss the exam integrity? I think Ed is going to be talking about that a little bit further as well.
This is Jane.
Hi, Jane.
I I do all of my exams on Proctorio with my students, and I have to do multiple choice proctored tests because this is a radiography program that at the end of their 2 years they have to take a multiple choice registry. So we don't really have any other way to do it. But I was watching going through the videos of the students when they were taking their test and just kind of going through it and thinking to myself, it would be really, really easy to cheat on these tests. Even though Proctorio is there watching them, there's nothing stopping them having 20, 30 little post-it notes stuck all around their monitors, and you would never know the difference.
Or their cell phone open, or another computer open.
Yep.
Don't joke yourself. I'm sitting at my desk with my work computer that has 3 screens, my cell phone, and my personal computer here. So take that for what it's worth, I guess.
Yeah, I guess the only thing with Proctorio that I thought about that is at least it's monitoring their face. So if they are looking at different screens and stuff, you can probably tell that.
Yes.
But the whole post-it thing, because I watch their eyes very carefully when I go through and look at the video. I mean, I do go through everybody's video and just kind of look at it randomly. But the thought to me was, even if you're looking at eye movement, if they have some post-it stuck around their screen, you would never know. But that being said, I just tell my students, if you're going to cheat, that's entirely up to you. But at the end of the day, it's not going to help you, because when you go and take a national registry at the end of the 2 years, you're just going to fail it because you cheated the whole way through school.
For that question, how do you maintain exam integrity? You listed really some of the big things that I think I would have already said as well. And I see some of the comments as well from Bill, and I think Kathy as well, just some of those same responses. And I know Ed's going to have a little bit more about that as well. So I don't want to fully answer that because I feel like I'll be stepping on Ed's toes. And plus, Ed just knows more about it than I do.
You go right ahead and say whatever you want to say.
Actually, I was kind of at the end of what I was going to talk about on that. So
so that was the nudge of let's move on.
I was like, Ed, you'll probably add something better than me. We are gonna move on, and hopefully some of those questions, and I know a few of them will be addressed in not only what I talk about, Ed talks about, but also I'll be adding some materials in the handout later today that will come out to you. So hopefully those will help some of those questions, and I'll be adding to them as well because it's kind of fun. All right.
Lane, I do have one thing I wanted to add.
Kathy.
For people who are doing anything with math, don't forget that in Canvas, you can do calculated answers with variables, with a variable. I've worked with people in the math department, so in essence, even if everyone has the same question, they're going to have different values in it. So, and then Canvas will check for you, basically calculate for you. So just something to keep in mind if you need them to calculate anything. The variables work very well.
Thank you, Kathy. That's great. That's one of those aspects as well, kind of the programming side of it. I know some people use, is it R, Kathy, that they can add those variables. So there's programs that build that all in.
Well, LaTeX depends on who you're talking to, but there's actually a formula question, so it's not really that. Here, I'll put it in the chat. But anyway, you can basically say one of these values in the formula is going to be different for everyone. So, it might be 1 for Ed, 2 for you, 3 for me, and then the rest of the problem is the same. But you're basically making different calculations per student.
Awesome.
Yep.
Thank you, Kathy. So we're going to move on then and have Ed take it over, talking about online assessment and Proctorio, or Proctorio and online assessment, whichever order Ed chooses. It's dealer's choice.
Yeah. So we're going to talk really briefly about Proctorio and online assessments because there is a course where all of the materials are for you, and that course code, or the link to it, is in the chat right now, and it enrolls you into that course as a student. So if you're like, you want all the documentation, you want all that stuff, recordings of workshops, they are there. So our intent before we hop into here is probably to give 8 to 10 minutes overview of what it is, a little bit about how it works, and not to answer every single question because we could be here for hours. And there is training available on this workshop training, whatever you want to call it, as well. So in general, Proctorio is an AI software that layers over Canvas Classic quizzes. So if you already have quizzes that are created, you don't have to recreate quizzes. And again, I emphasize that it's used with classic quizzes. Proctorio keeps telling us that they're working on the LTI for new quizzes, but we don't like new quizzes anyway, so we're not overly concerned about that. Proctorio is brought to the university basically in response to spring when everything went virtual and people were looking for a way to proctor exams. And Lane can add to this more because he was more on the adoption side of it, but we chose Proctorio over others because of the cost to the university, the way it integrates with Canvas, and the fact that students just need to use the Chrome extension with Google Chrome as well. A couple quick drawbacks: it doesn't work on mobile and it doesn't work on tablets. But there are loaner programs for the university on computers as well. And basically, you as the instructor would define what you wanted, for lack of better terms, locked down. And man, I went blank. Someone was just telling us that they walk through the videos, which is great, but you have to have all of your students need to be able to have a camera and the audio. You can lock down browsers, you can clear the cache, you can not allow new tabs to be opened, you can lock down re-entry or have re-entry time. Sometimes it's easier to talk about what Proctorio does not do, and the biggest request that we get that we have to tell people know about is it doesn't allow you to real-time watch someone take an exam like you are sitting in a room. So you can't sit and monitor this. It is feedback that is collected afterwards, and I bet it was Kathy that put it in the shared document. It does not send up a big flag that says, you're cheating. You can do monitoring through Collaborate Ultra though. So Kelly's, you can do monitoring through Collaborate Ultra though. Sure, but the issue with Collaborate Ultra, the way it sits right now, is you only see 4 or 5 students' computers or screens at one point, and you really can't choose who you're seeing and who you're not seeing. So unless you're teaching a seminar of 4 or 5 people, and congratulations, you've got a great gig, then you're not going to be able to visualize everyone's computer and share their screen at the same time or share their camera at the same time. So, and then again, people would be like, well, I can do 49 in Teams. Well, I don't know how you can actively monitor 49 screens at the same time as well. So is Proctorio perfect? No. Can it be used for certain instances? Sure. We do have workshops for it. And I'm going to show a little bit about the results that you would see at the end of it. Why people would use Proctorio would be it collects the data of what's going on in the student's computer while they're taking the quiz. And again, I learned something new today. I never even thought about putting Post-it notes all over the outside of my computer monitor. So there's another thing. Just realized too, you can have a phone open. We usually encourage people to use this on high stakes exams only because of one, we've heard about some anxiety issues and some people very nervous about it. So we'll take a quick look at Proctorio. If I gotta get my screen out here real quick, make sure that I've got the right screen, one of these 3 screens, sharing it. All right, so basically when you look at Proctorio, it's done with quizzes and it's done with classic quizzes, and in reality, you set up a Proctorio quiz the same way as you would any other quiz. I'm glad someone's watching the chat because I'm trying to do this. So you set up your quizzes the same way. You can preview your quizzes, again, which we highly encourage you to do. We won't need the access code because I'm trying to do it as the, if you get that, there's something wrong, and I was trying to do it as a test student. But basically, you set up your quiz the same way. You give it the time limits. You do everything you do normally, and then you layer Proctorio over that, deciding basically what it is that you want. Come on, computer. Too many video things, everything going at once. What Proctorio settings you want for the quiz. You have them take the quiz, and you get what's also in the quiz here, the View Proctorio Gradebook. And what you see in the Proctorio Gradebook is basically the list of students who took the quiz, and it can be filtered by name, submission time, attempt scores, suspicion level. So, and those suspicion levels will give you some flags on things, suspicious ID. So if you looked right off the top here, like, and again, we're not breaking any FERPA laws. These were all teachers who took this and things. So don't send us the email that we've broken all these FERPA laws. But just if you looked at this one right away, you'd be like 92 suspicion level. Man, this guy must have cheated. But if you do a little bit more looking into this, what it's going to give us is an incident log, so I can see where are the suspicion levels coming up. Was he looking away from the page? Audio recording, test takers looking away. You know, I would look at this and say, a quick view through here, that I don't have a huge concern here. I could go back to this, and as someone said before, I could play and watch him take the exam. You know, he's not centered in the middle, so the computer's going to have a little bit of problem that he's not centered in the middle. I can look at what's going on, all these flags that are happening. He's moving around. It looks like he was saying something to someone. What it also allows me to do is look at any web traffic, look at any abnormal changes in audio. So here's him, and here's the outlier. His audio is really low. I can look at the head movement. I can look at abnormal movement of the mouse, which seem to be high, if he's scrolling a lot, and computer performance. So, I mean, we pushed through this real quick. It doesn't ever, it's never going to come up and say, this person cheated. They're doing something wrong. And we've had plenty of people contact us and say, can you tell me whether this person was cheating or not? This is data, and the data is left open to you to interpret depending on what you were looking for, what is or is not going on. A lot of these will come up that they're flagged because there was a problem with the ID. Let's see what the problem with the ID was. I mean, this is telling me there's a problem with the ID, but that's just because the ID didn't fill the hole that the computer is looking for it. So Sachin, who used to work for us, and the first time I've looked at this, and I've looked, you know, he left here. He walked away. Where did he go? So that just tells me, you know, he turned around. Why did he turn around, and where did he go? So, I mean, these are just things that the data is collected and allows you to kind of look at. We certainly, it's a tool, and like any other tool, it depends on how you use it. If I have a nail to hammer in, I'm not going to get the screwdriver. So choose the right tool for the right job. Was there anything else? This is really cool that you can see all indicators, but it seems it could be very time consuming. You're absolutely right that it's very time consuming. I don't disagree with you at all. But I think it's used more as a deterrent. Is it used as more as a deterrent, or people watch the videos? Well, Sarah, I've talked to too many people, it feels like at times, that are using this. And I literally had, this is almost a quote word for word, I had an instructor say, I just want to scare them. I just want my students to be really nervous while they're taking the exam. And then I get some people that are like, I don't want to make them nervous, but I just want to, you know, be able to go back later and review it. So yes, Lane, that's absolutely, and you're right. It's not too bad because it highlights the area that are suspicious. I believe so, and I believe it's how you communicate to students. And in that course, in that course that we have for you, I'm trying to copy right now, and that we put in there. There's language in there for instructors to use. There's email template for you to send out to students. There, and you know, it's like anything else. It's how you present it to students and how you want to go forward with. We usually encourage people to do a very low stakes or almost useless practice quiz with the Proctorio setup the same exact way they would use it on a quiz. One, it helps lower the anxiety of a student. They're like, oh, I'm able to get into the computer. Oh, there's no problem. It's really not doing anything weird. And it also makes sure that their computer is set up that way. It also allows you as an instructor to see how things work first. So I think in general, off the Proctorio topic, a lot of how we assess students and what would make them comfortable comes from how we present things. Proctorio is no better than no proctoring. It does give you some information. Just remember, students cheat in the face-to-face class too. They absolutely do. And I'm going to tell you a really quick story. And this is 100% true. Last Friday, we get a lot of emails, and we started to work with an instructor that said, hey, I've got this exam coming up this weekend, and it's going to be 20 questions. They get 20 minutes to take it. I want the questions to go out 1 question per minute. They have 1 minute to take the quiz. I want it monitored, and it's done from Sunday from 12 to 12:20. I'm not making this up. And it was multiple emails over the weekend about why this isn't a good idea. And he's like, listen, this is the way I get great results. We do this in the face-to-face class. Are they crazy? Yes, they are. But it's like, I used to do this in a blue book, and they had to turn the page, everyone turned the page at the same time. So when we talk about assessments, it's so wide open on how people do things. I mean, and as much as we encourage this instructor, you're probably not able to do this, and it's not going to work out well. And I'm not sure, and I think I put a comment in there before, or in the shared document, that a lot of times when we move to online, we believe that 7 days a week is ours. And I was flabbergasted that this instructor said every single student only had 20 minutes. They had to log on at noon and done at 12:20. So I'm off my soapbox about that now. But with Proctorio, I mean, absolutely, we have several workshops. If you don't want to do the workshop, the course is there, which has a lot of documentation. Send us an email at CETL. I'm more than happy to meet with you one-on-one and see if it is something that fits your needs or wants. All right, Lane, I'm done talking.
It's always fun to hear your voice, Ed. So I'm happy to talk.
At least that's one person today. Excellent.
I think as well, like if you look at that documentation that Kathy and you wrote up, it's really not just about the technology. Press button A to get result B. It's really about a lot of, like, you know, what we're hearing in the comments as well. It's how you present this to your students. The Proctorio course offers a lot of strategies, not just how to do it, but really more how to do this well, right? How to set up an exam if you have to use Proctorio. We're the ones who administer Proctorio. We often recommend not using it if it's doesn't fit the situation. But it's really, if you are going to use it, how do you communicate to your students so you don't freak them out? Because you don't want to scare them, right? Because then you aren't going to be grading them based on how well they know the content. You're really just then grading them on how well they can deal with this type of pressure. If that's your learning objective, I guess that's maybe it. I mean, if you're trying to teach doctors how to do a surgery, maybe you want to have a little bit of pressure situation. But it doesn't seem like that's often the case that's for.
And I lied to you, Lane. And we should address, because we get a lot of concerns about if Proctorio is FERPA compliant and what data it's collecting. And there's resources and statements in the course that talk about that. And anyone who's worked here, I mean, I've been here less than a year and a half, but to get anything through the UW system, it has to be pretty well vetted for the amount of things that we can't use because of FERPA, even shadow of a doubt. If if Proctorio has gone through the UW process and is being used, I'm pretty sure that it is it's pretty safe with the student data. So and there's lots of FERPA compliance things in there. As I said, the email templates in there, and like Lane said, Lane's laughing at me because he wants me to turn on the camera probably with my foil hat that I made to wear. But it's all there. So, and we can help you out with it. I'm done now.
Yeah, the CIA is watching. There's a black helicopter out my window right now. Thank you, Ed. I appreciate that. And I appreciate as well your emphasis that this really isn't about, you shouldn't be using this to scare students. It's really there if you need it, especially, was it Jane was saying as well that, there's good ways of doing this, communicating, not scaring. Sometimes you just have to do it. You need to help students prepare for the boards in the nursing department, at College of Nursing. Sometimes you just need to use those types of tools, and that's what we're here for, to help. But there's other ways, and I think that's what I think Sarah was talking about in some of her comments as well. But there's other ways besides high stakes assessments. There's ways to refocus some of those high stakes assessments so that there isn't that temptation to cheat. It's the way to designing questions so that the question answers aren't just something you can find on Wikipedia, but it's something that forces students to think about all that they've been doing throughout that semester and apply it, right? It's not something they can just look up. It's something that they go back and they look at through the notes. And it's about helping you, it's you as an instructor, helping students create those habits, create those study skills that then they can use when making that larger scale assessment or just that final exam or whatever it is that you have designed. I'm going to open up my presentation again. Just give me a second. Visitor view is not what I'm looking for. There you go. Because what I wanted to share a little bit about is my story, and really talking about, when we're moving our exam or moving our assessment online, and not just thinking about, well, we have it online, that's progress, or that we're just going to take our face-to-face exam and we're just going to throw it online. So I'm going to talk about one of the courses that I was teaching and kind of how I can move away from that kind of maybe teacher-centered outlook, right, of just duplicating the experience that we had in a face-to-face course last semester or last year, or the experience that we had as a student, right? And probably we did pretty well at tests as students because we're in academia, and also thinking of ways to design assessment that is just focused on preventing cheating, but really focused on promoting growth. So that really what I wanted to talk about is kind of making assessment that should focus on student learning and growth, and creating that growth mindset. So I'm going to get these all open. I accidentally got a little crazy with the animation today in my Google Slides. So when I was creating one of my courses and moving it from a face-to-face course to an online course, right, I was creating exams that were exactly just what we're talking about. Maybe we shouldn't do, just focus on preventing cheating. Moving from from just a face-to-face session to something that is that is something that's just focused on looking at what students have done, what they've accomplished, backwards looking, summative, to really focus on how we can help students grow, and focusing on learning as a process, especially thinking about learning as a process. And this is really all connected back to Carol Dweck's research out of Stanford University's Department of Psychology. And she really talks about assessment as something that you can use to help students grow, and helping students really thinking about learning as a journey, and recognizing as well and opening up doors in our assessment that students are learning and able to demonstrate their knowledge in a variety of ways. It's not just having that exam that's at the end of the semester, providing students who are really good and really know their content, but are perhaps deeper thinkers, right? They really want to think through a process, maybe a little anxious, give them an opportunity to do well in exams, as well as the ones that are more confident and maybe able to quick on their feet. People like me, when I was taking exams, I could just zip right through them. I really enjoyed them. So I'm kind of ashamed to say that when I was first moving my courses online, I was keeping those high stakes exams that were just summative at the end of the semester. So that's boo on me. However, I was really working hard throughout that semester when I was building that exam. To work with other folks, work with other mentors, they really helped me think about how I could help students, even in an online setting, focus on learning as a process, focus on learning as part of their growth, right? And create activities that kept students accountable and taught them study skills, right? And developing assessment activities that were frequent, that allowed me then to gauge student comprehension. So the exam then had those 3 items as goals, right? Focus on growth as a process, kept students accountable, and giving frequent checks for students so I can gauge their comprehension. It wasn't just a matter of what did you learn, and I'm going to use that one shot to then justify my grade that I give you. So what I did is I created a lot of low stakes multiple choice exams, and just kind of get these all open, and I gotta look crazy. And I use them first to gauge students' comprehension, right? This is something that we often do in a face-to-face classroom really easily and pretty informally. Right? When we are in a face-to-face classroom, we can just look at students' faces and see pretty much whether or not they're paying attention, whether or not they're on Facebook or Minecraft, or whether or not they're asleep. We can just look at their faces and gauge where they're at. We can also gauge student comprehension through questions, right? We can ask questions, we can call on people, or we can encourage students to ask questions during class, or even before or after class, where they might feel a little bit more open to asking a question on their own. That really, one, helps you help them, but also helps you understand where students are in the classroom. And so that's really hard to do online, right? We can't see our students, we can't tell if they're engaged, right? It's harder to ask those spontaneous questions, especially if this is an asynchronous course. And certainly we can't see students when they're online. And we also aren't always privy to see the temptations, because I know when I'm online in a meeting, there's that temptation just to mute and then just start scrolling through Facebook and just kind of pretend you're there and not actually be there. Right? So what I was doing in this case is using those low stakes exams to really provide a snapshot of student comprehension, and then using that to inform and adjust lectures, both the synchronous lectures and the asynchronous lectures that I was providing. And then I would talk to students, and Anne was already mentioning this, Bill was already mentioning this before, is that you talk to students, you keep those communication open. You say, hey, look, this is one of the 5 common mistakes that I was seeing in your quizzes, just these low stake quizzes, seeing these 5 common mistakes. And we talked about those in the next lecture. We talked about how we could improve upon that next time. And oh, this was maybe an issue with me. Maybe I just didn't cover this very well in the lecture. I maybe rushed through it at the end. We talk about ways that we can improve and where maybe I fall, and maybe where they and also how they can improve. And then I also talked about muddiest points as well. I could use those quizzes to say, this is that one issue, that one thing that students are really struggling with. This is the muddy point. And I could use that as well. These are just low stake multiple choice exams that I was using frequently. I'd also use those low stakes multiple choice exams to encourage formative learning, right? So I was really using these throughout the semester, really kind of, again, this wasn't me, this was just people giving me this information. But I was using those questions that I was asking, and I was repeating the questions. So each week, or even twice a week, I would have a quiz. And then I would not only ask the questions that were current for that week, but I would also bring in some of the questions from the weeks before, right? Especially the questions that students were really struggling with, just to reinforce those main topics. So again, assessment in this case isn't something that is meant to test your knowledge, but is to help you develop knowledge, to reinforce those main points. That way the student sees this content not only just in terms of the lecture or in the reading, but they also see this content in terms of the questions that I'm asking in the assessment. And I'm also using those questions to reinforce key concepts as well. So I'm reinforcing the main things I want them to take away in the course. These exams were and frequent, and I was doing that again to hold students accountable, but also to teach good study habits as well, right? Frequent interaction with the content. It doesn't matter which study you look at, they all pretty much say the same thing. Frequent interaction with content is much superior to last-minute cram sessions, right? I wanted my students to learn how to learn. I wanted them to really think about their learning. And I was using those quizzes, those assessments as a tool to help them see, oh, this is how you create a habit of study. This is how you interact with this course content. If you do it frequently in smaller chunks, you're going to retain it better than if you tried a last-minute cram session. So again, talking about some of the questions that we already had today and talked about in the collaborative handout, how do we make students feel more comfortable when they're preparing for their maybe a larger exam or even some of their bigger activities? We teach that through how we design our course, right? We can design the course and set up learning objectives for students that aren't just about the content, but one of the goals for the course, one of the learning objectives can be teach you study skills that you can carry on throughout the semester, and then build those in through how we design the course and talk about that as well. Say, hey, I'm having these exams not because I'm just trying to hold you to your toes to the fire. I'm building these exams so that way I can show you how to build better study habits, and that's why we're doing that. The next thing I would do as well, you have a question?
I just wanted to say something really quick.
Yeah.
It's also, there's an opportunity here to like target like students like information seeking habits, like when it comes to like the way that we think they're cheating on an exam or what they're looking up. Like I think there's room to kind of target that, maybe not in an exam obviously, but like there's room to assess and like make sure they're at least looking up the right things and how they're looking things up, kind of like information literacy.
How would you do that? It's a really great point. I really appreciate that, Ben. Can you elaborate a little bit further, and then I'll get to Jane's question as well.
I think there's something maybe in between the exam and while you're helping them like build study habits. I think there's some area in there to do something where not quite like what a librarian would do with like an information literacy workshop, but I think that like a component of that is like really important to building good study habits. And like if they're looking up the right things ahead of time, then they're not going to be doing it mid-exam, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah. And so you're saying like, hey, just giving them maybe a selection of resources. You're not giving them the answers, but you're giving them kind of a curated list of like, hey, this is where you're going to find this material, and this is how you can work through this material so that you can find those answers a little bit more quickly. Is that kind of what you're talking about, Ben?
Yeah. And then it's targeted to like resources that they'll become familiar with using if it's important to like the discipline or to the class and stuff like that.
Well, that's really smart. So it's not just about you're teaching them the content, but you're teaching them the skills that they can use in the future.
Yeah, because I think like the only like kind of silver lining argument you can make to like cheating on an exam is that they're like trying to find where to look things up, right? Like
yeah.
So I think if you can kind of remove that from the exam, because you don't want them to cheat on the exam, but if you could kind of like work that into some other type of assessment, I think that might, there might be some benefits there.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ben. I really appreciate that. Jane, I want to let you comment.
Yeah, I was going to say one of the things that I did along the same lines as what you're doing with quizzes, I have at the end of each module a quiz set up that they have to take, and they can take it as many times as they want to. I don't grade them because I use it as a tool for them to figure out what information they're comfortable with and what they're not. And then I have them, after they've done the quiz, write up, what their muddiest points are, and then we address that in our review session for the big test. And it seems to be working pretty well with them.
I love that. I do that self-reflection, and then you reinforce that you talk about. It's not just something they do and then that's it. You reinforce and you talk about that later on.
Right, right.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Kelly had a good comment on the chat, so please read that. But I gotta run it out of time. So just I wanted to shout out to Kelly as well. The other is so I just kind of wanted to end out with really what was that student impact? Well, one, there was a love-hate relationship the students had, and this is what they would talk about in class because we would talk about these quizzes in class. That they had to complete them, and this was in Madison, and my class was like on Fridays when I would have the synchronous session, and so that was getting in the way of Thursday, and so some of my students were saying, hey, it really kind of works me off because I have to finish this exam and it's Thirsty Thursday, and I'm missing out on some of the partying, but I got it done. So come on, Lane. And then they're saying, but at the same time, I come to the synchronous session knowing the content, and then I could participate better, and I feel better as a result of that. So that was awesome. Thank you, Lane. And so it was kind of to get that dual-edged sword kind of going on. There was that love-hate relationship with the students. Sometimes that I saw that on the evaluations. Oh, we always had to do these stupid, these exams. They're kind of just so much stuff. But I think it really helped the students. So the evaluations aren't always going to be positive, but I think it really helps students. I was talking to students about this as well, and they were saying, yeah, those quizzes really helped me dial in what the key concepts were in this course. And the more I saw what was going on in those quiz questions, the more I could kind of pick up, just as you were speaking, the relationship between those quiz questions and your lecture, and then the relationship between those lectures and then the final exam. So they're able to make that bridge and improve their attentiveness during, when they're doing those online lectures. They're able to pick out what the main points were, because I'm always talking about those in those quiz questions, as reinforcing those. And not only did it help them in their study skills, but one of the things I always feel is important is it improved transparency in the classroom. I always hate it when I was a student, and I was always curious what it was the instructor wanted us to know. And I was just trying to find ways to help students understand what it was that I found was important. And that was one of the ways I was doing it. And then finally, and this is coming back to what we were talking about in the collaborative document as well, is it really helped lower apprehension when studying for the larger exams that I probably should have got rid of, the ones that I didn't have. Lowered apprehension. The students knew better how to study, and they knew better where to focus their time and their resources when they were studying. And it taught them better how to study throughout the semester, and not just that last night before the exam, do the cram session. This was stuff that students were telling me. And it was something that I was really happy about, because it wasn't, that was kind of a new thing for me. I'm trying to move this all online, which, the same thing for all of us, moving this all online. And so, again, focus, I think the reason why they worked is because I was focused on a growth mindset, right? Assessment to help students learn and to grow. It wasn't just a one-off event, just like Jane was talking about before. It wasn't just something that we do once and then do a quiz and then we never talk about it again. I talked about those quizzes all the time in the class. So that's a really important aspect. And I explained why I was talking about use those quizzes. Again, that conversation, I think that dialogue was really important. So I really appreciate today your attention. I really appreciate the discussion that we had today at the beginning. That was so fabulous, all your input. And again, just because, this is so different than what we've been doing before, the evaluations, I really...
Lane, you're muted.
Really appreciated everyone's work today, and really the collaborative spirit that, really was evident today. I really appreciated that. So please take the time to get the evaluation so we know how to improve and keep this a positive experience for everyone. I kind of got off script there, sorry. And then finally, I want to end with, next week, we'll be talking about online feedback. That's October 20th. So talking about strategies for actionable and timely feedback that guide students through their mistakes, correct misconceptions, and improves learning outcomes. Thank you, everyone. Ed, Kathy, and I will be hanging around to talk about this, to help you out with any questions you might have. Have a great week. Take care.